I want you to think about the last time you stayed somewhere that just felt off. Not haunted in a movie way, not flickering lights and floating chairs. Just wrong. Like the air itself was sitting too still. Like someone had been in that room recently and left in a hurry. That feeling where the back of your neck goes tight and your brain won't tell you why. The story I'm about to tell you comes from a woman named Rachel Chen. She's real. What happened to her is documented, not by ghost hunters or paranormal investigators, but in actual police reports, a 74-page psychiatric evaluation, and the testimony of her sister, who watched her deteriorate over the course of 6 weeks. I've spent months going through this case, and the further I dug, the more I understood why Rachel refused to ever talk about it publicly. This isn't a story about a ghost. I want to be clear about that up front. It's something far more unsettling, because ghosts, at least, are supposed to be dead. Rachel was 29 when she moved into the apartment on Whitmore Street. It was October 2019, and she'd just taken a new job as a data analyst in a city she barely knew. She found the listing online. Rent was below market, 3rd floor, utilities included, available immediately. The landlord, a man named David Hargrove, was pleasant enough on the phone. A little too eager maybe, but she chalked that up to him just wanting the unit filled before winter. The first time she walked through the apartment, she noticed something she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't dirty, it wasn't run down, but it looked like someone had left in the middle of living there. Not fully moved out, more like stepped away. There was a faint dent in the wall beside the closet, the kind you'd make if you'd thrown something hard. The bathroom tiles had been recently scrubbed, bleach clean, which should have made her feel better. It didn't. She asked Hargrove about the previous tenant. He told her the guy had moved out of state for work. Quick, clean, no forwarding address. She asked how long ago. He said about 3 weeks. She asked why the unit hadn't been filled yet. He said the right person just hadn't come along. She signed the lease that afternoon. Her sister, Maya, helped her move in that weekend. Maya said later, in her statement to police, that she felt uncomfortable in the apartment from the moment she stepped inside. She described it as the kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting for something. She tried to convince Rachel to keep looking. Rachel laughed it off. She said Maya was always dramatic. For the first 2 weeks, everything was fine. Rachel unpacked, learned her commute, started finding her footing in the new city. She bought a small plant for the windowsill. She ordered takeout and watched shows on her laptop. Normal life. The kind of ordinary rhythm that makes you feel settled. Then she started hearing the sounds. It started with footsteps. Not above her. There was a unit above, and she could hear that neighbor occasionally, a normal muffled thud of someone crossing a room. This was different. These came from inside her apartment, specifically from the closet in the bedroom. She told herself it was pipes. Old buildings breathe, everyone says that. She Googled apartment sounds at night and found a dozen forums full of people explaining away exactly what she was hearing. She convinced herself for about 4 days. Then she woke up at 2 a.m. and the closet door was open. She was certain she had closed it before bed. She was meticulous about that, had been since she was a kid, one of those habits that just stick. She got up, turned on every light in the apartment, checked every room. Nothing. Nobody. She closed the closet door, went back to bed, and lay there until morning with her eyes open. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't want to seem like she was falling apart in a new city over a door that probably just had a loose latch. The next week, she found something in the kitchen drawer. Behind the takeout menus and the spare batteries she'd shoved in there on move-in day, there was a notebook. Small, black cover, spiral-bound. She assumed it was hers, assumed she'd packed it without thinking. She opened it. It wasn't hers. The handwriting was small and cramped, pressed hard into the pages, like whoever was writing had been pushing down with too much force. Most of it was illegible, frantic, scratched out, rewritten in margins. But one page near the middle was clearer than the rest. It said in careful block letters, "He comes back when you sleep. Don't sleep facing the wall. Check the closet every night. He knows when you've forgotten to check." Rachel sat with that notebook for a long time. Before I go on, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, do that now. I put a lot of time into researching these cases, and there are several more coming this month that are, if anything, worse than this one. Hit the bell too. The algorithm hides these videos from subscribers sometimes, and I don't want you to miss what's coming. Okay, back to Rachel. Rachel called the landlord. She told him about the notebook and asked, again, about the previous tenant. This time, Hargrove's tone changed. He was still polite, but something underneath it went careful. He told her the previous tenant had some mental health struggles, that he'd been a bit paranoid toward the end of his stay. He said the notebook was probably just the ramblings of an unwell person and that Rachel should throw it away. He offered to come by and pick it up himself if it was bothering her. She said no. She kept the notebook. Instinct, she said later. She didn't know why, just that getting rid of it felt wrong. What Rachel didn't know, what she only found out much later, was that the previous tenant's name was Marcus Webb. He had lived in that apartment for 11 months. He had not moved out of state for work. He had been admitted to a psychiatric facility in November 2018, 2 weeks before Rachel moved in. The official reason given on intake paperwork was acute delusional disorder with paranoid features. But his sister, who tried to visit him and was told he was too unstable for visitors at the time, said Marcus had been perfectly normal 18 months before. She described him as calm, sociable, good at his job, not given to anxiety or dramatic thinking. The change had started, by her account, about 2 months after he moved into the apartment on Whitmore Street. Now, you might be reading this and thinking, okay, so there was a paranoid tenant before her. She found his notebook. She started getting spooked by normal apartment sounds. That's explainable. That's just psychological contamination. One person's fear bleeding into the next person's perception. And that was actually my first instinct too, reading the early case documents. Then I got to the part about the photographs. In week 4 of Rachel's stay, she got a package at her door. No return address. Her name was written on the outside in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a manila envelope, and inside that were 12 photographs, printed on standard photo paper. They were all of her apartment. From inside her apartment. Taken through what appeared to be the closet door. Through the slats, because you could see the narrow horizontal lines of the louvers crossing the images. They showed her kitchen, her living room, her bed, and in some of them Rachel was visible, asleep, in her own bed. She called the police. 2 officers came, looked at the photos, took a report. They checked the closet, found nothing. They said it was possible someone had installed a camera, looked for one, didn't find one. They suggested it might be a former occupant with a key who had been entering the apartment. They recommended she change the locks. She did that the next morning. She also pushed her dresser in front of the closet door that night. The dresser was moved by morning. Back against the far wall, exactly where it had been when she first moved in. She called Maya. Maya drove 3 hours to be with her. The 2 of them went through every inch of that apartment. Inside the closet, behind the walls where they could see, under the floors in the one spot where a board was loose near the bathroom. They found nothing. Maya wanted Rachel to leave immediately. Rachel said she couldn't afford to break the lease, that she'd lose 2 months' rent, that she was probably scaring herself, that there was a logical explanation. Maya left reluctantly. She said she checked in by phone every day after that. Rachel started sleeping with the lights on. This is the part of the story that I had to read 3 times before I fully processed it. And I want to be careful about how I present it, because it's in the police report, and I'm going to describe it as it was described there, without embellishment, because it honestly doesn't need any. In week 5, Rachel noticed that the section of drywall beside the closet, the same spot where there'd been that dent she'd noticed on move-in, had a slightly different texture to it than the rest of the wall. She'd walked past it 100 times, but one afternoon, with the light coming through the window at a specific angle, she could see that a roughly hand-sized section of the wall had been repaired, patched and repainted, but not quite matching. She pushed on it. It gave slightly, more than drywall should. She got a knife from the kitchen. She cut around the patch. Behind it was a hole about the size of a shoebox. Inside the hole was a prepaid cell phone, fully charged, no SIM card, a folded piece of paper, and a small digital voice recorder. She called the police before she touched anything else. The recorder had 22 audio files on it. Most were ambient noise, the sounds of an empty apartment. A few had voices, muffled, indistinct, clearly recorded from inside that hole through the wall. In 2 of the files, there were long stretches of someone breathing, slowly, like someone waiting. The folded paper had a single sentence on it, in the same cramped handwriting as the notebook. It said, "I found this too late." The police identified the handwriting as Marcus Webb's. They also, at this point, finally looked more seriously at David Hargrove. What they found in the course of that investigation is where this story stops being ambiguous and starts being something that genuinely kept me up at night. David Hargrove had owned the Whitmore Street building since 2009. In that time, 11 different tenants had lived in apartment 3C, the apartment Rachel rented. The average stay was 9 months. 4 of those tenants had, at various points after moving out, filed police reports related to stalking or harassment. 3 had sought psychiatric care within 6 months of leaving. One had disappeared entirely and remained listed as a missing person as of the time the investigation started. Hargrove himself had no criminal record. He was cooperative with investigators. He expressed concern for Rachel, called her a lovely young woman, offered to let her break her lease without penalty. He was, by all accounts, pleasant, measured, helpful. A search of the building's basement found a secondary access route, a crawl space running the length of the building, accessible through a utility door that Hargrove alone had the key for. From this crawl space, through specific access points, it was possible to reach the interior wall cavity of apartment 3C, including the section beside the closet. They found evidence that the crawl space had been used recently. Frequently, Hargrove was arrested. He was charged with multiple counts of criminal stalking, invasion of privacy, unlawful surveillance. His trial is ongoing as of my research into this case. The evidence against him is substantial. Marcus Webb, when contacted through his care facility, he had by then been discharged and was recovering, said that he had suspected what was happening, but that no one had believed him. That's what the notebook was. That's what the recorder was. He had been trying to build proof. He had been afraid to use the front door by the end, because he knew Hargrove could see him whenever he wanted. He said that some nights he would lie in bed and just feel watched, with absolutely no way to prove it, and that feeling, sustained over months, had broken something in him that he was still working to put back together. Rachel stayed with Maya after the arrest. She said she had trouble sleeping for a long time. Not because she thought Hargrove would come back. He was in custody. But because the experience of knowing that someone had been watching her while she felt safe had rewired something in her head that couldn't easily be undone. She never went back to the apartment. She left her security deposit, left some furniture, left the plant on the windowsill. She said she didn't want any of it. I've covered a lot of cases on this channel. I've looked into disappearances, murders, cults, cold cases that have sat untouched for decades. And I won't pretend this is the most violent story I've ever researched. It's not. Nobody died in apartment 3C on Whitmore Street. Rachel is okay. She's building her life back. But something about this case gets into your head in a way that's hard to shake. I think it's because the horror here isn't supernatural. There's no twist ending where something inhuman turns out to be responsible. It's just a man with a key and a crawl space and a willingness to spend years doing something like this to person after person. What gets me is the design of it. He didn't pick random people. He chose tenants who were new to the city, who didn't have local support networks, who were rebuilding something, a career, a life, a sense of independence. He chose people who would be easy to gaslight, who would be most likely to explain away what they were experiencing rather than trust their instincts. And the notebook Marcus left, the recorder, the evidence he hid in the wall, that was a person trying desperately to be believed from beyond the point where anyone would believe him. He knew what was happening to him and he put something in the wall for the next person, just hoping they'd find it. Rachel found it, and it's the only reason, investigators said, that the case ever broke the way it did. I don't say this in every video, but I think it matters here. If you ever move into a new place and something feels wrong, don't dismiss it. I know that sounds like obvious advice, but the whole architecture of how we talk about being scared is designed to make you feel foolish for trusting your gut. You're being paranoid, you're being dramatic. It's just an old building. Trust what you notice. Photograph anything that looks recently repaired. Check the common areas for access points that aren't on any lease or floor plan. If a landlord is unusually eager to get a unit filled, if the rent is notably below what the area warrants, if they're reluctant to answer basic questions about previous tenants, those aren't red flags by themselves, but they're worth sitting with. And maybe most importantly, if you find something in a wall, call the police before you touch it. Rachel did this right. That discipline is the reason the evidence held up. That's the story of Rachel Chen and Apartment 3C. I'll link in the description to the news coverage of Hargrove's arrest and the public court documents for anyone who wants to verify any of this independently. I'd encourage you to do that. Don't just take my word for it. If you've had an experience like this, not the supernatural kind, the real kind, the kind where something was happening and nobody believed you, I want to hear about it. Leave it in the comments or reach out through the email in my bio. I read everything. I can't always respond, but I read everything. And if someone in your life is telling you they feel watched or unsafe or like something is wrong in their living situation, please listen to them. Marcus Webb spent months trying to tell people. Rachel almost didn't find his message in time. Subscribe if you want more cases like this. There's one coming next week that starts in a very ordinary way. A woman notices her neighbor's car is always parked in the same spot, at the same angle, facing her window. and end somewhere that I am genuinely still processing. See you then.